Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome
evening.
along on this Friday night. Delighted to have 8 great drams in front of us. I'll give you a wee quick intro about some stuff that we've got coming up. As you'll see on your tasting sheet, we have our next big club tasting with Tormore Distillery, and Kate Watt will be joining us both online and live in Dumfries. We also have a brand new exclusive whiskey coming out. We're very excited to announce that this will be the first UK release from this distillery. We have an exciting Oloroso Octave coming from Billy & Co, which is the crafty distillery local to us in Newton Stewart. It'll be 3.5 years old. We're bottling it at 50%, and there will only be about 100 bottles. So it's going to be very limited.
Yeah.
We're very excited. We both tried it.
Very good.
Recently.
It's a young whiskey, but it's very good.
And it's excellent. So we're looking forward to getting that bottled and out to you. So I think we'll just get straight into it. We're delighted to welcome Mark Watt tonight. We'll bring Mark on stage.
Certainly shall. Here he is.
How we doing?
Good evening.
Good, how are you?
Aye, good, thanks. Just hearing you saying Kate's coming to do the next one, it's a bit of a Watt invasion at the minute.
That's right. For those not in the know, Kate is Mark's wife, so it's one after the other. That'll be good though.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
The new Tormores are superb. But you always knew that they were going to do good things. Sikander and Ollie are involved. That was only going to go one way, and that was up, to be honest. So
absolutely. I've tried them. I don't know if you've tried them.
I've tried a few of them. I don't know if I've tried the same ones, all the ones that you've tried, but I've definitely tried the 3 that we've got on the shelves in a minute.
Yeah, I was really impressed. So keen to try a wider range when Kate comes down.
Yeah, and the good thing is, in our next release, we've got a cask of Tormore coming. So I mean, I don't know how that happened. So it's just pure coincidence. So.
Pure luck, that.
Yeah,
it's who you know in this game, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, we've got a good lineup tonight.
Yeah. Let's just
crack on.
It was a great tasting last week. Everyone enjoyed themselves. So hopefully the online folks and people watching at a later date as well will hopefully enjoy these whiskies.
Yeah, and it's a fairly easy evening. If anybody's got any questions at any point, just fire away. There's Robert in. Robert was actually in the shop today, so it's kind of bizarre that he's in Campbelltown watching this stream from somewhere over there, probably. So it's
he'll be chatting at the door in a minute.
It will be.
If I don't get going with the first dram, so I think that's probably what we should do.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get started.
Talk far too long before getting on to the first one, so I don't know if you've got sheets or whatever, but we're kicking off.
Tasting sheets.
Yeah, everyone's got tasting sheets.
We're kicking off up in Speyside. I'm born and bred Speyside. My wife's from Campbelltown, so there's the only 2 regions that you need to worry about in Campbelltown. There's that island over there that's got some distilleries on it, but you don't need to too much. But we're starting off one of my favourite distilleries of late, and that is Strathmill. It's a 10-year-old Strathmill Hoggy, and this is at 56.4% ABV. Not a distillery that people get excited about. I
see a lot.
Yeah, it's one of these things that I always laughed that there was no Facebook groups about there was all about Springbank. So I started It's All About Strathmill. We're the fastest growing Facebook group. I think we've now got 6 members. We had 4 last week, so it's really taken off. But for me, this is the kind of thing that I love doing with Watt Whisky, and I've always loved it in my time in whiskey, and I'll probably touch on myself and Kate's history in a bit, but we'll get drinking first. Is bottling things from underdog distilleries, and that's why it's really good to host these tastings so that people can try them, because if you walk into a whiskey bar and it's got a Watt Whisky 10-year-old Strathmill on the shelf, you're not going to drink it because if you're in that bar, you're in a really good whiskey bar if it's managing to stock our stuff. So it's going to have a lot of shiny things that you're going to go, oh, I must try that, I must try that. And things like Strathmill get overlooked, which is a shame. But
I like the independent stuff, to be honest. It's nice when you see the indie stuff because, like you say, I mean, you don't see a lot of Strathmills.
No. And we'll be seeing even less of it going forward because I think the last 3, maybe 4 years, Strathmill has been closed. It's not been producing any whiskey at all, which is a shame. But in fairness, how do you get people to like your whiskey? Close your distillery. It worked for Port Ellen. It worked for Ardbeg. So when my sales are going low at What Whiskey, I'll maybe close What Whiskey, and that'll help sales go through the roof. So it's Strathmill. It's based in Keith. In fact, I think it is still in production, but they're producing gin at the distillery. I've only been around the distillery once, and that was probably 15 years ago, maybe a bit longer. And I was in the still house, and I was like, it reeks of gin in here. And I was like, well, maybe it's just me. It was a Saturday morning, And but no, they do produce a lot of gin there, which kind of ties in quite nicely because the distillery used to be owned by Gilbey's, and they were the big gin producers. And it is quite interesting with the history of things. Now, everyone says single malt whiskey started in the 60s when Glenfiddich bottled their stuff, and obviously Glenfiddich's a huge brand and they did really well, but Strathmill was a big brand back in the early 1900s when Gilbey's got a hold of it. I've found adverts for Strathmill single malt, as a single malt brand in Alaska, in Australia, in Hawaii, in 1903, 1908. It was a big brand. During Prohibition, one guy actually got caught with 77 bottles of Strathmill and in the back of his truck, sunk into mattresses. I don't think anyone else has ever had 77 bottles of Strathmill since, but the fact that the newspapers just said
available, Mark, for folk to buy for
that. The newspapers at the time reported it as there was 77 bottles of Strathmill. They didn't have to explain that Strathmill was a Scotch whiskey or a whiskey or whatever. So it was obviously a big enough brand that the name was enough to tell you what it was. So it's about time Strathmill made a comeback. But this lovely...
A lot of bourbon cask stuff tonight, Mark, as well.
It's mainly bourbon cask. We've got one that's been... two that have got a touch of sherry, but not overly sherry. Occasionally, we do some sherry monsters. I grew up at Macallan when it was good. So, it was a long time ago. I do like a sherry cask whiskey. And, occasionally we do bottle some sherry monsters with Ben Rinnis that would been 2.5 years in a sherry octave, and with some Glasgow that's been very heavily sherried. But my preferred style is bourbon or refill sherry or just a touch of sherry. For me, the whole point of an independent bottler is to let you try different distillates, different styles. And sherry cask whiskey can be brilliant. It can be really good. But if we were to take a Strathmill, an Inchgower, and the Royal Brackla that we're going to, and the Glenelgin, the first 4 that we're going to have tonight, for example, and they were all matured in first fill sherry, they'd be brilliant whiskies, and they would sell quicker because people taste with their eyes, which you shouldn't do because it hurts. But if we put all 4 of them in first fill sherry, they would all taste very similar. There'd be good sherry whiskey.
Tell them apart. Exactly.
You wouldn't necessarily taste the differences. And for me, the whole point of an indie bottler is to let you try the different distillery styles, and taste the Strathmill style, taste the Glenelgin style, or so on and so forth. So,
bourbon's the best way to do that, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, bourbon or refill sherry. It just gives. It's getting the balance right, and the balance is one of the key things in everything. Is cask adding to the whiskey, maturing it a bit, but not necessarily overpowering it. It's, and there's nothing wrong with having a massive sherry cask or a massive port cask or something that's hugely peaty or one-dimensional. It can be great, but we've been on the go 6 years now. It was 6 years the other day since we bottled our first cask. We've bottled 118 casks in that time from 57 different distilleries. So the whole point is to have different things. If we just wanted big sherries, you just vat them all together and stick them in a sherry cask, and would be happy. But I'd probably have sold them all. But it's
I like it. I've got no complaints here. Like Callum likes his bourbon cask as well. So
yeah, no, I'm a big fan of bourbon cask whiskey. I know you said people taste with their eyes, and you're totally right. Although I do feel like finally there's a bit of a market for proper bourbon cask whiskey.
No, I think there is. There's a market for it, and there's a market for whiskey that tastes like whiskey, which is I was going to try and get T-shirts made with that. What whiskey tastes like whiskey, but
absolutely.
But there is definitely a market for that, and markets evolve. Like I've been in this 28 years, and when I first started trying to sell things into Taiwan, if it wasn't dark in color or it didn't say Macallan on the label, you couldn't sell it. But there's also color is one of these things that's so much misconceptions, because the industry as a whole has been pushing for years that darker is better, and blah blah blah, and there's also the myth about peaty whiskies being darker, which is always quite fun. I remember once working at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society behind the bar, and this guy came in and he was showing off about how much whiskey knowledge he had to his pals, and he was like taking them through the taste, and he wouldn't listen to my recommendations at all. I mean, I wouldn't anyway, but never mind. And he was like, "Oh, and us to get peatier, they get darker," and I was like, "No, they don't." He's like, "Yes, they do." And then so this final whiskey was quite a heavily peated Kalila, but it was only 6 years old, and it was like it was like a water, just slightly more yellow. He was like, "Well, this will not be peaty," and he near blew his head off with the amount of peat that was in it. So it's.
I'll be taking back on his comments after that, like.
Yeah, but there's a lot of this that people, myths that have been perpetuated. Lovely starter drams. It's all doing healthy here, Mary, but never mind.
We've got 7 more exceptional drams after this. Absolutely.
For me, I really like this. I don't know. I always say this in my tastings. I always feel sorry for the dram that goes first.
I was going to ask you how do you decide which one goes first then? Because
you kind of try and start lighter and build up or whatever. Sometimes you build up in the middle of the tasting and then go back and come back down again and go up. A kind of roller coaster tasting. But you've got to start with something, and hopefully everyone that's at home tonight has had a drink before they came here, because the first whiskey of a tasting, your first whiskey of the day is never your best, because like even if you've had no alcohol before you come to the tasting, or you've maybe had a beer at 4, 5, 6% ABV, or you've had a glass of wine at 10, 11, 12%, whatever, and then you put something that's 56.4% in your mouth, your taste buds aren't ready for it. So like if I'm ever tasting cask samples, I normally have a little sip of something to kind of calibrate the palate before you move on. That is one key fact that we have at What Whisky. One of our philosophies is never pick pished. You should never pick a cask. It's a bit like going to warehouses. Warehouses are great. Like you go and do the Springbank warehouse tasting, the Cannes warehouse tasting, and they're all great. But I would never buy a cask of whiskey in a warehouse, because you get caught up in the romance of it, and it's the best whiskey you've ever tried. And, we've all been there. You go on holiday and you come back with a bottle of Ouzo, which was brilliant in Greece. But when you're sat in Campbelltown or Dufton in a January and a Tuesday morning drinking Ouzo, it's not quite the same is sitting on the beach, you know. So
I don't doubt it is.
We actually did buy a cask at the shop when we were at Claxton's. We did a wee tour and tasting, and dipped into a cask with no inkling really to bottle that cask.
Yeah.
And we all tried it, and we all just looked at each other and thought, we have to have this. And Martin, the warehouse manager, he was not happy. He wanted it. He wanted to bottle it himself.
I know that's the problem if you let people into your warehouse, and that's why we're lucky. We don't have one, so that's all good. Yeah. But yeah, we try.
Very nice dram to start the evening. I would say.
The good thing is, if you're at Claxton trying casks, you could have been trying mine, because all of our casks are at Claxton's. So it's it's good to see that you weren't drinking my whiskey. So
just received your delivery this afternoon, Mark.
Excellent.
So we're stocked up on the whiskies for tonight.
We are indeed. Just a wee note on that, everyone will probably be able to see a wee QR code at the top of your screen. So you can all scan that, and that'll take you to the website if you want to buy the dram that we're tasting. We'll rotate them as we taste other drams as well. So feel free.
I do like that. Really grassy, easy going. But yeah, you always want to start with something easy going, but then quite often in a tasting, it doesn't matter how good the first whiskey is, it doesn't stand up. You know, by the time you get on to 5, 6, 7, everyone's liking everything, well, or unless they don't like the peaty stuff, you know. So it's getting over that first one, and you almost feel like you should do a warm-up drink before you start the tasting, but then that's like saying, oh, this one's not good enough to be in the tasting. You know, and then, well, you can't use someone else's brand and go, well, that's a bit pish, so we'll just start with that, you know, because you might end up working for them someday. So, you know, you've like anybody's going to employ me now, that's for sure. So, yeah. But I think we could probably move on to the next whiskey, which is one of my, again, I'll probably say it 7 times, one of my favourite distilleries, Glenelgan, 11-year-old, 55.3%. Another hogshead, another wee fruity number, really juicy. Glenelgan's a dram that I've always had a soft spot for a number of reasons. One, as I say, I grew up at Macallan, and when I was wee, the tankers used to come in and about to the distillery to collect the pot ale, and they would take that. There was a processing plant near Glenelgan distillery, and the lorry drivers would pick me up, and we would go for a drive to get rid of the pot ale and to Glenelgan. So it was always, you know, lorry, when you're 4 or 5 years old, getting a trip in a lorry was just like the best thing in the world. I don't think they're allowed to do that kind of things. I don't know if I would send my boy off with a random lorry driver. I presume my parents knew the lorry drivers, but it was just
much health and safety these days.
Yeah. And then when I first started in whiskey properly, I started working at the Craigellachie Hotel. It's a hotel in Craigellachie. At that time, it was a real whiskey destination bar. It had 700 single malts in the bar. So this is 1998, so well before the kind of proper whiskey boom, if that makes sense. And
before
the only reason I got the job was because I could reach the top shelf and get the bottles. That was pretty much it. I actually thought I was going for a job as a pot wash, and they were like, "Oh, we'll give you a job behind the bar," and I really got into it. And when we was there with one customer that would come in, and he would only drink, it was a 1968 Glenelgan Connoisseur's Choice bottling, and he only ever drank that. And I thought, right, I need to try this, because, you know, you've 700 other single malts, and this is the one that he stuck with, and it always stuck in my mind that how good it was. And this again is showing how good Glenelgan is. And different distilleries get followings at different times. You know, there's some things, you know, are really popular and then they're not. And I think Glenelgan is on the rise of popularity amongst the people in the know, which is really good, but really bad at the same time. We always like shouting about the kind of hidden gems, but then when they get popular, we can't afford them. And you're like, why did I tell so many people? You know, it's you know, back in the day when I was at Duncan Taylor, it was Capardonic. I used to scream about how great Capardonic was, and nobody wanted it, and then everybody wanted it, and I couldn't afford to drink it anymore. So it's it's a double-edged sword, really. Yeah. So to give you a wee bit of, sorry, what you said?
It's very fruity on the nose, nice tropical notes as well.
Yeah, I always say that, you know, tropical fruits. It's like, well, all fruits are tropical in Scotland. But to give you a wee bit of history of the company, we've been on the go 6 years. It's just my wife and I, and well, Kate's only part-time these days. She's working with Elixir, so she'll be coming up doing the Tormore tasting for you next month or whenever, 6 weeks' time, which should be good. She's much better at this gig than I am. To be honest, the whiskey industry has taken a bit of a downturn, and we thought maybe one of us should get another job just to take the pressure off. And Kate is much more employable than I am, so that made that decision fairly easy. Yeah, it's just me and Kate. Kate's been in the industry a long time. I've been in the industry a long time. So I started off behind the bar at the Craigellachie Hotel, went to Edinburgh to study, and was at working behind the bar at SMWS, working at Royal Mile Whiskies. In fact, part of my third year at university was a 12-week work placement, and I did it at Royal Mile Whiskies, where I was already working, and I stayed there 18 months, and then they were like, you should probably go back to uni. But that was quite fun. And then from there, met Ewan Shan, the owner of Duncan Taylor, and got a job at Duncan Taylor. Started off kind of sales executive or whatever it was called, and then ended up sales director at there, which sounds very grand, but it wasn't really. And then Kate, on the other hand, she's born and bred in Campbelltown, and we love it in Campbelltown. We stay here now, but when Kate was young, all she ever wanted to do was leave Campbelltown. I say Campbelltown is a wonderful place, but I imagine when you're 16, 17, 18, it's not the most happening of places. All she ever wanted to do was leave, so she went to uni to study languages. I think she's fluent in French, Spanish, and Italian. So, punching up, as you can tell. I struggle with English, but never mind. And so, but she didn't know there was whiskey jobs. You know, even though Springbank's, you know, in town, and Glen Scotia in town, wasn't really a thing. And even back then, there wasn't the same amount of people in the whiskey industry as there was. Our mum ended up, was playing tennis with somebody that worked at Springbank and found out there was a job going. So Kate was like, well, I'll apply for it because there was lots of travel. I'll work there for 6 months, 12 months, and then I'll get a real job. So she started working at Springbank in the sales team there, and she fell in love with it, and she stayed there 8 years, which was brilliant. In fact, at one time, when Ewan Mitchell left Springbank to join Arran, she was the only salesperson for about a year for Springbank for the entire world, which is no difficult because you're like, no, you're not getting any. It's
just telling no to a lot of folk.
Yeah, sales prevention officer, I think.
4 times a year, mate.
So that was where it was, and so I was at Duncan Taylor at the time, and I say there was less people in the industry, so we all travelled around the world together, and it was amazing times. It was great fun, but you travelling around the world, and everybody had the same stand. You know, we all had the same 6-foot trestle table with a tartan cloth over it, you know, and dishing out drams. And I'd be behind my stand, Kate would be behind her stand, Richard Patterson would be behind his stand pouring drams, Billy Walker would be behind his stand, Jim McEwen. You know, it was mental. So we got to travel the world with all these legends, and it was, you know, an absolute. So then Kate and I got together because we were seeing more of each other traveling the world than I was seeing the folk in Speyside. And so she left Glenfarclas. No, she left Springbank and moved up to Glenfarclas to be with me up in Speyside. And then about a year after she moved up the road, I left Duncan Taylor and got a job at Cadenheads and moved to Campbelltown. So we went separate directions. So didn't go down too well. to begin with. Sorry, hold on a second. There's somebody trying to get in.
You got a customer.
I'm just going to get rid of them.
That might happen to us later on as well.
Yeah, right, yeah. It already happened earlier. So.
Obviously, we're live. We're live from the shop tonight. Same as last time, so we might get drunkards coming past the shop in a couple of hours. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, excellent! Really good. Like I was saying earlier, I love a bourbon cask.
All right, cheers, take care.
Glen Elgin is not one you see very often either.
No, it's definitely on the rise.
Sorry, it was some Irish, just tapping on the. Yes, so
I'll get them in.
I'll meet them in the pub later, so it's all right. He had a pack of sausages in his hand, though, so it was a bit strange. So we were traveling the world, and I moved to Cadenheads, and I headed up Cadenheads for about 8 years. It was a brilliant time. Cadenheads, brilliant company, but left there in 2019, and then thought, "Oh God, I need a job." It's a no.
I'll be
for
back
me.
at your door, mate.
It's no me. Oh, it's no me. I was thinking, no, no. He doesn't like the whiskey, and you're putting it up on screen that he doesn't like it. I'm getting heckled already.
I wouldn't do that to you.
So that was, we came down here, left there, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I was lucky I got offered a few jobs because people hadn't seen me working. But they meant either traveling a lot or moving, like living in London, which was no for me. I mean, I moved to Campbelltown. I'm one of the few people that came to Campbelltown and think it's a big place, because growing up at Macallan where there was 13 houses, and then living in Dufton where there was 1,300 people, and then Campbelltown 5,000, 5,500 people. It's a metropolis. I've got palm trees in my garden. It's brilliant. So I'd always thought it would be fun to have my own independent bottling company, but never thought it would work, because like when you work for Duncan Taylor or you work for Cadenheads, you're working with big money, big numbers. You've got warehouses full of casks that you can just go and pick. And Cadenheads, I don't know if you've met Jenna that works for Cadenheads. She's absolutely brilliant. But I would just taste something and go, "Well, that's brilliant. Let's bottle it." And Jenna would make it happen. And it just got done, and it was brilliant. So I never really thought it would work, because obviously I don't have Cadenhead money. I have no money. But we decided to run the numbers, and Kate's dad's an accountant, or was an accountant, so we run the business plan through him, and he was like, "Oh, this could work." So a few things came together, and we thought, let's give it a go. So that was November 2019. We thought, Christmas is coming, we'll take a few months off. So we didn't really start working on the company until February 2020, just in time for lockdown, which was brilliant time to start a company. Kate was pregnant with her second child. COVID came, waiting for Brexit to come. So it was brilliant time to start a business, really. I didn't have that in my business plan, but it worked. So yeah, as I was saying earlier, we our stuff goes at Claxton's Distillery, because we are very much what people call an armchair bottler, in that we do nothing. A lot of the time people say that it's a derogatory term, but I live up to it, so it's fine. We do nothing. We've got no warehouse. We've got no bottling hall, whatever. It's quite funny. You see some companies trying to make on that they have, warehouses. They're like, "Oh, there's me in my warehouse." And you're like, "That's not your warehouse." You've just. It's not so much indie bottlers. It's more the cask investment people that are making on with this. Although I have seen a couple of indie bottlers that are claiming, "Oh, this is my bottling hall," and you're like, "That's not your bottling hall." It's funny. There's a mate of mine. Well, that's a lie. I was going to say there's a mate of mine. I went to school with him, and I've not spoken to him since I left high school. So we're good mates. But he works in a warehouse up in Speyside, and I've seen his photo being used. There's the same photo of him rolling a cask by 3 different cask investment companies that have like stenciled on or whatever, Photoshop, that's the word, Photoshop their name onto the side of the cask, and you're like, oh yeah, this is us in our warehouse, and you're like, no, it's not, mate. So we're very open about the fact we don't have anything. So when we started, we knew we could buy casks. I was fairly hopeful we could sell stuff, but it was the middle bit that was the problem. And everyone told us that bottling was really difficult because everything was taking forever to get bottled. I spoke to one guy that had a first fill sherry octave of whiskey that he bought because he loved it, and 8-9 months later he was still trying to get it bottled. So it's not going to be the same beast that he started with. But that's where we got in touch with Claxton's. David Stark put us in touch with them, and we hit it off with them really well. Good people, and they obviously had more money than us, so they built their own bottling hall and they have excess capacity. So they've been really good to work with.
They're good guys. We've had a couple of casks done with them as well.
No, they're really good. I mean, Martin likes to dot the I's and cross the T's, and which is good. It's what you want, but at times it can be frustrating when you're like, well, you know what I meant. If I've mistyped the cask number or something, but it's but no, they're really good to work with, and quite handy as well, because in some markets we have the same importers, and you have maybe some markets like Austria that not going to buy enough to fill a pallet themselves, but if they can mix a pallet between Claxton's and What Whisky and maybe some of the other indie bottlers that they've got, then it helps everybody. And I think that kind of is one of the great things with the whiskey industry, particularly when it's indie bottlers level. It's a global industry, but it's very small. We all know each other, and we all try and help each other out wherever we can. We're all technically competitors, but we all go for a beer together. We all drink whiskey together. So we like the Glen Elgin.
Yeah, excellent. It's great. Very impressed. The praise was high coming from the live tasting last week, but yeah, certainly living up to it.
Yeah, no, I really like it. It's a shame. It's a distillery you can't really get to. Even trying to do the drive-by to take the random photos with your bottles outside it, you can't really get that close to it. Well, the bits you can get close to are fairly ugly, which is kind of annoying. But it's definitely one that we will bottle again. I think this is the third cask of Glen Elgin that we've bottled. We try not to repeat things too often, but occasionally, well, 3 casks of Glen Elgin in 6 years is not too bad, to be honest.
That's not bad at all.
That's a fine track record.
We try. It was funny. I got offered some casks yesterday, and there was a Glen Elgin on it, and I was like, "No, I can't buy another Glen Elgin. I need to go and do something else first." So, because that's the thing. We've got a budget to buy casks, but we don't have a huge budget that we can buy stuff and sit on it for a long time. I'd love to be sitting on 3, 4, 5 years worth of stock and know what we're doing and blah blah blah, but it's I've not got the Cadenhead warehouse anymore. That was the saddest day when I left Cadenheads, was when I had to hand back the key to the Springbank warehouses. I still to this day don't understand why they gave me a key to the warehouse in the first place, but I don't even think they knew I had one. That's the thing. I should have just kept it. So.
Definitely should have kept it. Yeah.
Those keys are priceless at the minute, I think. No, excellent first 2 drums to get started.
We should move on to possibly a bit more of a surprise package, the Royal Brackla 11-year-old. This one, another Hoggy. Brackla's not a whiskey that kind of jumps out at me that much of thinking I really must try this. So we got offered some casks, well, a cask of Brackla, and I was like, I'll take a sample. And I wasn't actually really expecting that much, if I'm honest, when we got the samples. And then I tried it, and it's been the one that I keep reaching back for over and over again.
I've always been a fan of Royal Brackla, to be honest. everything I've tried from there has been pretty spot on.
And it's a big distillery. It's 4.2, 4.3 million litres of alcohol. I think at the minute it's down to producing about 2.5 million litres. But I mean, it's still producing 2.5 million litres at the minute.
A lot. Yeah.
But you don't see many bottlings of it. There's a bit more coming from Indies now, so hopefully we'll see more. In fact, I got offered a cask of 19-year-old Royal Brackla today at a really good price. But I was like, I've just bottled a Brackla. I need to go for something else. So it's
I mix it up a little bit.
57.2, so still high strength. So yeah, so the companies, the whiskies are called What Whisky, and that's not, well, I say, even though I do have a massive ego, I didn't want to put my name on the label initially. When we started the company, I thought we need a name for the company. So we looked it up, and Campbelltown Whisky Company Limited was available. And I was like, I'm having that. That's just too good a name not to have. I was like, yep, I'm having that. So that was great. Registered that, all good. And then obviously there's rules when it comes to labeling things. And so I know all about labeling rules now. So if What Whisky goes under, I'm going to go and join the SWA and become a legal label spotter because there's so many things that I'll not bore you with necessarily just now. But well, if you see Kate, she'll tell you that I'll be flicking through Facebook and see a new bottling being released by somebody, and I'm like, that's an illegal label. That's an illegal label. I just get more and more annoyed all the time. So our labels are certainly not illegal. So, but the problem is, if your company was founded after 2009, if you have the name of a region on the label, all of the whiskey has to come from that region. So we couldn't do Campbelltown Whisky Company Glenelgan or Campbelltown Whisky Company Royal Brackla. To the extent that on the back label, I don't know if you can see it, it doesn't really matter. It's not that exciting. On the back label, it'll say What Whisky, Glebe Street, PA 28. We're not even allowed to put Campbelltown in our address.
Really?
So they were that strict about it.
Wow.
So we thought, what we're going to do. And speaking to people, like, well, to be honest, although the company's new, Kate and I are not. You know, I've had a harder paper round right enough, but we're fairly well known, or by some people. I could put it in a warehouse and hold on to it, but that's a lot of money out of my pocket. Is the problem that I can't then spend on something else, you know. But yeah, maybe in the future we'll have that kind of money. So we're speaking to people and they're like, well, it's you and Kate that are the driving force of it. So What Whisky made sense. It's good alliteration. So that's why What Whisky came about. It wasn't because I was like, I must have my name on a bottle of whiskey. It was because Campbelltown can't be on it. So.
Strange rule, that, isn't it?
It is a strange one. But there's a lot of strange rules. You know, it's a bit like, you know, I get you should only be allowed to put the youngest age on a whiskey in the bottle.
That
but
makes sense.
If you're doing a blend and you can prove that 52% of it is 12-year-old and 18% of it is, you know, whatever, you should be allowed to put that on. You know, I get it if you're trying to infer that, this is whiskey up to 60-year-old in it and it's got one molecule of 60-year-old in it. You know, it's a bit cheeky. But if you give people the full facts, you should be allowed to say whatever you want.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. This is a really interesting dram for me because the first two, not to say the first two were similar, but they had the same sort of style to it. This is totally different, even though it's bourbon.
It's a bit bigger. It's kind of thicker. It's juicier. And that's, again, the distillery style is a thicker spirit coming off the stills. So that's coming through quite nicely. And again, it's quite nice to see, you know, you've got so far 3, we're going to have another bourbon cask one next, you know. It's shows the difference the distillate makes, you know. I mean, as much as I always say cask is king, because it is, you know, if you, the cask, obviously, every single bit of the whiskey production is important, you know. But if you take a good spirit and put it in a bad cask, you'll get bad. It doesn't matter how good your fermentation is. If you put it in a rubbish cask, you've got rubbish whiskey. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't take a rubbish spirit and put it in a good cask and think you'll get good. As some distillers have tried, but it's, you know, it does show that the quality of the spirit shine through. And again, you know, those first 3, if we put them all in first full sherry, be good, but you're not getting the style coming through.
Yep. Yeah,
it's a quality dram, that one.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
But for me, that's the kind of dram that I really like, is the ones that people are not necessarily expecting, you know. And I like that, because, you know, and I've always liked that throughout my career. When I was at Duncan Taylor, when I was at SMWS, when I was, you know, wherever, in Cadenheads. When I was there, you know, I was bottling Springbanks, I was bottling Ardbegs, I was bottling Bowmore 66s, I was bottling Banffs, Conville Moors, Port Ellens, you know, you name it. And we've been, you know, I was looking through the malt whiskey yearbook, and, you know, throughout my history, I've bottled most things at some point, apart from all the new distilleries, obviously. You know, we were bottling St. Magdalene's and things like that. But even when we were bottling that, I always championed the underdog, you know, the Milton Duffs, the Strathmills, the Glen Elgins, you know, the Royal Bracklers and that. Because bottling a good Ardbeg isn't difficult. You know, if you've got the cask, it's not difficult. Do you know what I mean? Bottling a good Ardbeg is difficult these days because you need 16 million quid to buy a cask. But but it's, you know, it's
you've not got one there.
You know, it's not difficult, and you bottle it and people buy it, and that's great. And, you know, back in the day when prices were cheaper, as soon as you thought about bottling an Ardbeg, it would be sold out, you know, or it was already on auction, you know. Whereas for me, it's much more fun to pull out a Brackla, something like this, that the next time you've got pals around at your house, you're going to pour this to them and go, here, you need to try this. You know, you're not going to crack open your expensive Ardbeg because, you know, they might, I want to keep that for myself, you know, or they might not like it, you know. Because that's one of the things. You always think, oh, I've got all these special bottles, I'll open them on a special occasion. Special occasions are the worst time to open good bottles. Because it's a special occasion, you're there, and your Uncle Jimmy's there who'll drink anything, you know, and you're pouring till a bumper and they're like, oh, that's all right. You're like, you know, you're much better.
What's the rest, mate? Can I get a bigger measure than that?
I don't particularly like that, but I'll have another one. It's much better to have these special bottles on a random Tuesday night, you know, and you've got a couple of pals around, rather than, you know, big dramatic special occasions or whatever. But we all still do it, you know. It is one of these things. But yeah, so I always like things like this that kind of catch people's attention.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So you notice it was at 57.2%.
Yes.
So higher ABV, but
yeah, 288 bottles in total.
Yeah, so not a lot.
There's not a lot. Well, we've got none left in Bond. So you guys took the last of our stock. Or actually, we might have a couple of bottle cases, but nothing major. But it's one that. It's one of these. See, when I started my own whiskey company, I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have loads of whiskey, because I keep thinking, oh, I should put some of that aside. You know, I should put some of that aside. And then you're like, you know, it's you and Mitchell phoned me up when we started the company. He was like, Mark, remember, you're supposed to sell. You've got to sell more than you drink. You know, it's. I thought this would be great. I'm going to have loads of whiskey, and it's like, no, well, I should probably keep that. Probably sell that. But we do keep 2 bottles of everything that we've ever bottled. One bottle we'll keep indefinitely as a historical archive. Legally, you've got to keep a bottle of whiskey for 5 years anyway, in case. Yeah. Normally the bottling hall keeps it, but you've got to keep it for, I think it's 5 years, in case like someone drops down dead and you're like, oh, it's because of that Watt whiskey, and you can go, no, here's the control bottle. It was the 15 pints of Guinness they had that was a problem. It's
that makes sense.
So we keep 2 bottles, one to keep forever, unless things go tits up, and then we can sell the complete range of an independent bottler in one go. Or I'm always looking for an exit strategy. But also,
that's your private collection, isn't
it? Yeah. Also one bottle of everything to open on a future occasion. But when you're only 6 years old, it's not really, let's dive into the archives. I think we're one of the whiskies we had tonight was bottled 2 years ago, so that's technically us diving into our archives, so we'll maybe try and hold up. Speaking to Kate the other day, we were saying we'll try and hold off opening any of them until we're 10 years old, and then we can dip in and open some of the old bottlings.
Anniversary celebration or such.
Yeah, but we'll not be doing 118 celebrations, so that's.
That's something we do. Obviously, we bottle some whiskies. We always keep an archive, and recently we've done a couple of archive tastings. Dipping back into our old flight series, I think we did.
That's right.
A couple of years ago now at the Queer Arms.
That's a good one.
And obviously that was bottled way before my time. I'd have been a wee kid when they were bottled. So it's
a great thing when you're working for a company with history,
Yeah.
So we're just making the history now, and hopefully, we'll there'll be somebody around to drink these things in the future. It's
long may it continue, Mark, because it's good stuff you're bottling. To be fair.
Well, we try to bottle things that we like, we bottle things that we like because if it all goes tits up, then at least I'm drinking whiskey that I like instead of sitting there drowning my sorrows with rubbish whiskey. But then if I'm drowning my sorrows with rubbish whiskey, going, oh, this is terrible. Why did I bottle this? Well, maybe that's why the company didn't work. If you're bottling whiskey, it's one. We kind of have 3. We'll bottle anything, and that sounds wrong, but we'll bottle anything as long as we like it, as long as it's natural, so natural color, non-chill filtered. When we bottle rums, which we do occasionally, they have to be no added sugar, no dosage, all that kind of stuff. And it has to fit what we class as our kind of price-quality ratio. I'd like to be cheaper, but just being a small company, economies of scale aren't there. For some time, to give you an example, we moved a cask from Ardnamurchan to Claxton's, really good, but moving that one cask, I think, cost me £350, because it's not way to go. But then I was moving a cask from Whisky Broker to Claxton's, but there was already a lorry going up with other casks. So I managed to, piggyback on that, and it cost me £16 to move the cask. So it makes a big difference with things like that. So there's just things that we can't get down.
That's still a pretty considerable trip, that, from Whisky Broker at Claxton's.
Yeah, but there was a lorry with maybe 100 casks going up. So instead of a van with one cask, so it's it makes a difference. The price quality ratio, we want to be on shelf. I say we're on shelf about the cheapest thing we've ever done is £50, and between £50 and £120 these days. Probably trying to be under £100 a bottle, because I want to be able to afford to drink my own whiskey. I don't want to be sitting going, oh, should I open this for a tasting, or it's £400 or £500 or whatever. And we get offered those casks all the time, but it's not the market that I'm comfortable in. Also, we technically could possibly afford it, but then all of your money's tied up in that one cask, and if it doesn't move off the shelf, you're there with all this whiskey that you can't sell that's too expensive for MD to drink. And there are other companies that bottle these things, and it's a different marketplace from us, and fair play to them, do it. Everybody, different people, different courses. But for us, I want people to drink my whiskey. You'll never make money, neither will I, but you'll never make money with what whiskey. Although I used to always say that you'll never make money at auction with what whiskey, but annoyingly, there was one of our last Glenelgans, even though it was on sale at £68 a bottle still, it went for £150 at auction. And I was gutted when that happened, because normally at auction I bid for my own whiskey sometimes because it's cheaper than
a bargain.
Produced. But it's aye. So yeah, that's the kind of philosophy behind the company. We're not saying you're going to like all the whiskies that we bottle, because we all like different things, and I'll kind of come on to that probably later on. But hopefully you'll be able to see why we tasted it. It might not be to your taste, but you can understand the philosophy of why we went for it. So,
yeah.
Moving on.
Shall we move on to number 4 then? Yes.
Number 4, another one of my favourites, Inchgower. This one I've got a soft spot for because I actually used to live at the distillery. So when I left university and started working at Duncan Taylor, I moved back home to my mum at Macallan, and I hadn't lived at home for 5 years, so it was fairly wasn't good for mum, wasn't good for me. But my mate Laura, she was working for Diageo. She was trainee distillery manager program with Diageo, and part of her job, she got a 4-bedroom house at Inchgower Distillery. That's part of the job as well. And she was in the same situation, and she said, well, come and share with me. So that was fine. Moved into Inchgower. It was great. And then about 6 months later, she moved out and moved in with her boyfriend, which I didn't notice for about a month. Because back then I was traveling so much, I was never there. And so then I stayed there for another 6 months, and then thought I should maybe tell Diageo that I'm living there. So for about 6 months, Diageo paid my rent, so that was always a good sign. But this one, you always forget, even having lived there, that Inchgower is actually a coastal dram. It's because I've got a wee shop in Campbelltown now, and it's more of an office, but I've got a lot of time in my hands where I can read things. You tend to think, it's a Speyside. You don't think it being coastal, but it's fairly close to the sea. In fact, Kilcoman Distillery is twice as far from the sea than Inchgower is. So I told you I have a lot of time in my hands. It's out with the maps and rulers and all. But I did it online to figure it out. But and I'd never really thought it was coastal until I was looking at that, and then looking through, I love old whiskey books, and I was looking through that, and everyone talks about Inchgower as being coastal, and I've now put that thing in your head now that this is probably salty character coming through. So there we go. But it is a coastal dram, and it is quite fun when the whole salt and whiskey thing. Is it there? Is it not? I remember.
I did notice that you wrote an article on this, Mark.
Yes, I did. I was going to. That's where I'm going with this. Is there saltiness or not? If you smell salt or taste salt, then yes, it's there. You sometimes smell, welly boots. I'm sure the chemical formula for welly boots is not in whiskey, but it's quite an amazing thing, because everyone says, whiskey by the sea is going to be more salty and all these kind of things. And there was actually some scientists did some research into it. They were looking at different metals that's in whiskey, but they also tested for sodium, so the amount of saltiness in whiskey. And they took 35 standard bottlings and tried them. And the one that had the most salt content in it was Glenfarclas. And it had more than double the amount of salt in it than Bowmore did. So this whole, it's by the sea and it's getting that sea air. I mean, a lot of stuff is much more than the mainland anyway. It's got central belt smell. It's but when they did the analysis of it, it turns out that even the Glen, it wasn't a fair if it wasn't the Glenfarclas saltiness was more than 100 times less than is detectable by the human palate. So even though it's there, you can't detect it. But the whole thing with like saltiness in whiskey is because our brains are mental. Our brains think we're lazy, or our brains are lazy actually, and they fill in things for us. So that's why, you know, like a magician will confuse you by like throwing a ball in the air and you think it's been thrown because your brain's just filled in the gaps. And your brain does that when it comes to saltiness. You'll smell or taste something you'll smell something and it'll trigger something that's got to your brain going, oh, that's a smell that I associate with saltiness. We'll just say that this tastes salty, and we just send a message to the brain saying it's salty, whether it's there or not. So whether it's there or not, your brain says it's there. So it's as you say, you can tell I've got a lot of time in my hands these days to read all these kind of crazy things. Because I just think the brain, how taste works is phenomenal. How smell works. You know, a molecule has to come out your glass, go up your nose, land on a certain taste receptor, which then sends an electrical impulse to your brain, which then goes through a filing cabinet and pulls back a memory and does that, you know. And it is mental when you start thinking, and then you realize how things like COVID can be spread so well, because you'll be out and someone will be smoking at the other side of the street and you can smell it, and you're like, that's a molecule of that has traveled from there into my nose. Or, you know, they'll be spreading muck in a field quite a far away, and you're like, a little bit of coo shit just went up my nose. You know, it's which makes you think when you smell a fart, to be honest. But it's you know, it is a quite amazing thing, the brain. You know, I think my favorite thing about the brain is it's the only thing that's ever named itself. You know, it's. So Inchgour, salty, I really like this. And again, you look at the old adverts, Inchgour was a reasonable brand in the 60s and 70s. But if you look at the old adverts, so it's the Homa Bells, well, one of the Homa Bells whiskey. And the old adverts would have Inchgour and Blair Athol or maybe Dufton single malt whiskies. But at the front would be the Bells, because the Bells was the big push. And, you know, we've got these single malts, but Bells is what you should be drinking. But that said, I don't know if you've ever tried any of the Bells that were bottled in the 60s and the 70s. Some of them were absolutely stunning. Annoyingly, you used to be able to pick them up for like 30 quid a bottle, but now people have cottoned on to it and it's getting a wee bit more expensive. But then when you think about it, a bottle of Bells in 1970, 1972-ish or whatever, that was a luxury product. You know, a bottle of Bells there wasn't much difference in price between a bottle of Bells and a bottle of malt. You know, it was very close. And there wasn't the same malt components or single malts on the market. So there was more malt going into the blends. And if you look at it, and I keep meaning to do the research on this, but if you look at what the average wage was in 1972 and what the average price of a bottle of Bells was, it was a big chunk of change. It was quite a big bit of your weekly wage. So if you were to take the average wage now, you know, it's probably the equivalent of like 150 quid bottle of whiskey in today's, today's markups and things. And, you know, so it's not quite the same as it used to be. So Inchgour, another distillery gets overlooked, but it shouldn't. So as I said, I used to live at distillery. Every house I've ever lived in full time, I've been able to see a distillery from. So that kind of explains a lot. So growing up at Macallan, I could see Craigellachie, Benrinnes and Macallan from a bedroom window. Then moved to Dufton, lived next door to Mortlach Distillery, lived next door to Dufton Distillery. And then, well, now I live next door to Springbank Distillery. When we were living in Dufton, Kate and I bought a house together, and I was like, can't buy this house, dear. Can't see a distillery from it. And Kate's very artistic. She was like, don't worry, I'll draw a distillery on the window so it'll look like you can see a distillery. And then I went out to the garden and went behind a tree, and I could see Cornwall Moor Distillery. So I chopped down the tree. It sounds more impressive than it was. It was just a wee weeping willow, but it was. But that did go. So yeah, every house I've lived in, I've been able to see a distillery from. So
Excellent.
It's quite nice, that, in a way.
Yeah, we're not as lucky here in Dumfries. We've got a bit of a checkered history with distilleries on and off. We're lucky now that we've got 2 big distilleries near us, Bladnoch and Annandale, both producing it, which is great. Great for the
when I was
area.
When I was at uni, I had to do a course on entrepreneurship, and I tried to do it on Raymond Armstrong at Bladnoch. But he was too busy, and he didn't have time to answer my questions. So I ended up doing it on jigsaws for some reason. I have no idea, but about some guy that started his own jigsaw company. It is always funny when you meet people, because like obviously I'm passionate about whiskey. You guys are passionate about whiskey, but it's always nice seeing people that are passionate about what they work at and what they, or things that they're passionate about. I remember once having a dinner, and I don't know why I was at this dinner, but I ended up sat next to a guy who was a sweet potato farmer, and he was so passionate about sweet potatoes. After an hour and a half dinner with him, I was like, oh, I need to go out and try different varieties of sweet potato and all these kind of. I mean, I never did. For that 2 hours, I was just like, oh, this sweet potatoes are the future. It is quite fun. So that's the Inchgour. Do we like the Inchgour?
You're so right. You're so right.
The salty character's definitely coming through tonight, but the power of suggestion is always.
Yeah, it's like salted caramel.
That. Yeah, I do get a lot of toffee on that.
Try to think.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think what nonsense I wrote in the tasting
Is it salted caramel?
Peaches and syrup, very creamy, honeycomb, slightly minty with lots of butterscotch. There we go. Tasting notes are complete nonsense, but I'll come to that a bit later. So, are we ready for the next?
You wrote them, Mark.
I know. That's why.
Yeah, we're ready for that.
So I'm just going to move these. Round 2.
Forward.
So we're on to the Ben Nevis. Really pleased to be able to bottle a Ben Nevis. This one's a bourbon barrel, so first full barrel. Only 300 bottles, 53.7% ABV. I've always wanted to bottle a Ben Nevis. Well, for what whiskey, I've always wanted to bottle a Ben Nevis. But Ben Nevis is one of these drams that's quite hilarious because it only got popular fairly recently, Ben Nevis. When I first started in the industry, even like Ben Nevis, the kind of legendary vintage is the 1996 vintage bottlings. I know I was at Duncan Taylor, we had loads of 1996 Ben Nevis, and I could not give it away. I mean, it was only 8 years old at the time, but you know, that's how long I've been on the go. But Ben Nevis, you couldn't give it away. There was nobody wanting Ben Nevis, and then all of a sudden it took off. Basically because of independent bottlings, like giving people access to all these 96 Ben Nevis, and it got really popular. And then obviously everyone found out that all the award-winning Japanese whiskey was Ben Nevis, so that made a difference as well. People started going for it, and then it got to the stage where you just couldn't afford Ben Nevis. The cask prices were just getting out of hand, but thankfully the whiskey industry is in a bit of a decline, which is not something that someone who owns a whiskey company should be happy about, but it's meant that cask prices are coming down. Since we started the company, after the first 4 years, cask prices had more than doubled, and it was just getting ridiculous. But now they're coming down, and they're more things are becoming available, and prices are coming down, which means we can then pass that prices on to our customers, rather than taking healthier margins. It just makes it easier for everyone. And I think, although times are tough in the whiskey industry, and possibly more so in the production side of things, because the whiskey industry was growing. It's been growing for 30 years. And then COVID came along and it went whoosh through the roof. And everyone started going, oh, this is going to continue forever. And one of the things with whiskey is people seem to forget, people never look at the past and see what happens. There seems to be new people come in and don't look at the past and just think, oh, yeah, this is going to carry on forever, this growth. And it really was unsustainable. So, obviously feel sorry for anyone that's losing their job or whatever and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's more of a reset for the industry. Cask prices are coming down, and hopefully things will be a bit more sensible moving forward. You can see it with a lot of the big boys, their official bottlings. They're doing special offers on, knocking money off it. 20 quid off this bottle, 30 quid off that bottle, and you're like, if you can afford to do that, you were obviously taking the piss for the last 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're really pleased to get this Ben Nevis. Ben Nevis can quite often be quite a dirty, kind of meaty, rich spirit. This is a more delicate, fruity number. Bottled at 53.7% ABV.
Yeah, it's really peachy and kind of pear notes is what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, peaches and pears is.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got peaches on the tasting notes, so I must be right. But it's one of these that I really liked. Say, there's a romantic. I mean, when we started the company, I knew we'd be able to buy casks because I've spent 20 years. Well, prior had spent 20 years buying casks for other people. Again, with other people's money, it's much easier. There's a romantic image that people have of indie bottlers that we travel around Scotland, in our Range Rovers, going to distilleries, chucking £50 notes out the window as we go.
Having a jolly.
We go to Macallan and ask for a cask, and they let us into their warehouse, and we go and try something, and then we go to Mortlach and we try some of them, and then we go to Ardbeg, and they're like, okay, you can have two, but it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes we buy direct from distillers, and the big guys the big indie bottlers will have more contact direct with distillers than we do. There's always there's a love-hate relationship between independent bottlers and distillers, and that we love them and they hate us. So when times are good, they don't want to sell to us, and times are tough, we're their best friends again. And so it's getting easier to deal with some of these guys more directly. But generally what happens is you buy from a broker. Now there's brokers and there's brokers and there's brokers. There's like the top tier of brokers. There's probably 5 or 6 of them, to be honest, that buy the big parcels from the big companies. And then they'll split that down into smaller parcels and sell it to someone else, and someone else will buy a smaller parcel, and so on, until it comes down the food chain. Now, we're lucky at What Whisky that we're probably higher up the food chain than a company of our size should be. But that's purely because of people that we know. And, I spent a lot of money with these people. Okay, it was other people's money, but I spent a lot of money with them over the years. So we're kind of getting there. But the interesting thing is you've got to watch when you're buying casks. And again, I saw there was something on the Facebook and stuff yesterday, the people being scammed into buying casks that didn't exist. I don't know if you've seen the BBC documentary that was on about it.
Cask Spirits Limited or something like that.
Yeah, which was quite funny because my mum heard it was coming on. She was like, "You're not going to be on this, are you, Mark?" And I was like, "Come on, man, have some faith in me."
That's shocking that. I say that about you, Mark.
So, but no, it was all good. But there's brokers and there's brokers and there's brokers, but there's a lot of people selling casks of whiskey that they don't own, which is kind of off. Although I'm a big hypocrite because I do it myself. Occasionally, I will sell casks of whiskey on behalf of other people because they'll give me a list. I'll send it out to my list of contacts, and if people buy it, I make a commission. It's not something that I'm hugely proud of or whatever, but you need money. But I don't have a problem with it because I always do it. When I send it out, I always send it out with other people's headed paper or whatever. Say, this is XYZ company's cask. If you buy it, I get a commission. happy days. If you don't, it doesn't cost me anything. Whereas you get a lot of other people will take that list and send it out as if it's their casks, and it's like, oh, look, I'm a big whiskey bar and look at all these casks I have. And you're like, no, you don't. You got offered them. I know exactly where you got offered them from because I'm a geek. Every time I get offered a cask, I log it in a spreadsheet. And it's a phenomenal spreadsheet. Someday I'll send it to somebody, but it's, there's tens of thousands of casks I've been offered over the years. But it's great for following the curve and what's going up in price, what's coming down, where the price points are, and I'm a proper geek with these kind of things. But it's also interesting to see who's getting what, And I say some of these whiskey bar and some of these traders, they'll copy and paste somebody else's list and slap it onto their list, and they'll not even change the format, so you can see exactly if you get lists off of more than one, 2 or 3 people. You can see exactly where it's came from. And instead of making a commission, they've added their margin on, and, so much so that when we first started the company, in the same week, I got offered exactly the same cask of Kalila by 5 different people in the same week. And the price went from £2,500 to £12,500.
That's mental.
So if you don't know what you're doing, it's easy to get ripped off, because what happens is I'll have a list of casks. I'll send it to you, Johnny. You add your margin on. You send it to Callum. Callum sends it to Mary Bell. Mary Bell adds on her commission and then, adds on her margin and sends the list to me, and she's trying to sell me my own casks back, And it has happened. And that's where it can get difficult trying to get samples, because if I want a sample of that cask, I've got to ask Mary. Mary's got to ask Camel. You've got to ask you. And, it doesn't really work there. But when you're a big company, you can buy casks without samples because, well, you've got money. So you're maybe buying, you'll get a message through saying there's 25 bourbon barrels of Ben Nevis, 11-year-old. This is the price. And you send a text back going, yeah, that's fine. I'll take it. There's no romance in that, but they come in, you've got a better price because you've bought 25 casks. Some of them are going to be good. And if they're not, you're a big enough company to buy that. So you're a big enough company to sit on them, re-rack them for a couple of years or sell them off or put them in a blend. There's lots of things to do. At What Whiskey, we don't have that luxury. So we do taste 95% of all casks we buy before we buy them. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you've got to take a punt. And normally it works out. We bought some Campbelltown blended malts of Glen Scotia blind. That was always going to be good. We bought some Kalila blind because Kalila is a wonderful whiskey. It's reliable. Always reliable unless it's bottled by the distillery. There goes another job. But it's always been one of those distilleries that indie bottlers get much better. You know what I mean. But yeah, we bought Kalila blind, and we got the sample of it after we bought it. And I thought, well, even if this is rubbish, I'll bottle it as the shit Kalila, and it would probably sell quicker than a good one, because there is a kind of industry joke that if you're bottling a bad Kalila, you may as well give up, So do we like the Ben Nevis?
Yeah, absolutely, fantastic.
I like it.
Really good. It's not one I've got a lot of experience tasting, but it's one that certainly has almost like a cult following.
It's got a proper cult following these days, and again, that cult following's been built up because of indie bottlers. Absolutely. And I do always think that there's a lot of distilleries that don't sell to indie bottlers. Things like Glenkinchie don't sell very much. Oban doesn't sell very much. There used to be some Oban on the market like in the 60s or 70s, but very, very little. And I think amongst whiskey geeks, these distilleries miss out because you go Oban, they've got the 14-year-old, and I think there's a distiller's edition, and there's the Little Bay or whatever. And there's probably some older ones that I've never tried. But it's a very narrow selection. So you go, you try them, and it's done. Whereas if you sell to indie bottlers, then people go, oh, I've had the Walt Whisky Oban, or I've had the Signatory Oban, or I've had the Claxton's Oban, and it builds up a bigger picture of what Oban is, and then people get excited about the distillery. So if you want people to like your whiskey, you should sell it to indie bottlers. Is really the way to do it.
100% agree with that.
Yep.
So the next whiskey is the only one that's a bit different. Well, they're all different, but is the Tianinic. So this is 10 years old, 56.1% ABV. But this one has been finished for 33 months. I'll double check that. Yep. So we always put all the information on the back label. 33 months in first full Oloroso hogshead. And I like this because, well, it's good, but I like because the sherry has been there, but it's not a massive sherry bomb. You're still getting the Tianinic coming through. Tianinic's one of these distilleries that there's not really much exciting to tell about it. But other than in 2000, they got rid of their mash tun and they replaced it with a mash hammer and a mash filter, a grain hammer and a mash filter. So basically, instead of going through the mash tun, they pound down the barley, the malted barley, into basically flour. So, normally you go around distilleries and husks, flour and grists, and you've got to get that right so that you don't clog up your mash tun. But it's basically, it goes into a mash filter. Basically, you push it in, there's really fine plates, and it's like a big balloon comes up and pushes the wort through. And it's super, super efficient. So whereas in a mash tun, you're getting probably between 65 and 85% of the sugar out of barley. In the mash filter, you're getting up to 99, 98, 99% of the sugar out of it. So it's a much more efficient process. There's two distilleries, Tianinic and Inchdairney, have mash filters. But mash filters are not new. They've been used in the beer industry for a long time. It was invented in 1903 and been used in the beer industry, but it's only since 2000 that it's been in the whiskey industry, and it makes for a grassier, but a very clear wort, much more efficient. But it gives you more grassy kind of style, a lighter kind of style whiskey, which you still get coming through in this, even though the sherry's been there for 33 months.
Yeah. Does that mean then that there's a longer fermentation needed in the washbacks, or?
I think the fermentation at Tianinic is fairly short.
Right.
I would need to double check that off the top of my head, but I think it's fairly short. I'll just check.
I'm just curious.
78 hours.
All right. Okay. So yeah, that's quite short.
You've got to love it. Malt Whiskey Yearbook is the absolute hero.
Bible.
That's the Bible.
It is the Bible, but I'm lucky. I've got them all since 2006, and I think it's very important to do it. And it's good for my job because when we bottle something like a Tianinic, you can look up. Okay, they're doing 78 hours fermentation just now because that's the latest copy. But really, you need to go and look at what was happening in 2015 when this was distilled, because.
Exactly.
We all go to distilleries and they tell you their fermentation times and blah blah blah, and nothing's ever changed. And
They don't tell you about the past in that regard.
Nothing has ever changed, but things change all the time. So when you go to distillery and they tell you their fermentation time, and then you're trying their 15-year-old in the visitor center, you're like, well, but what were they actually doing 15 years ago? What they're producing today is completely different, and more so with the bigger companies because they'll chop and change all the time. Everyone always says, "Oh, we have a long and a short fermentation time," as if they've planned it. It's only because of the weekend. You either have a short one to get home on a Friday, or you leave it over the weekend, so you've got a long one. It's not. It's all about efficiencies and things like that. Altmore, a dram that we've bottled. At the time when we bottled it, they were doing 60 hours and 120 hours fermentation, and they were actually doing it quite religiously. They would do 60-hour fermentation, take half of the fermentation out, and then leave the rest for 120 hours, and that was fine. But now they're doing 75-hour fermentation the whole time because the distillery manager was told to make 3 million litres of alcohol, and that was the most efficient way to do it. So things change all the time. And then you look at things like Dalyuen and Benrinnes will change their Dalyuen particularly. When I first started, it was a big meaty, sulphury dram. They then changed it to make a nutty kind of style. And then when Clynelish closed, they started making waxy style at Dalyuen, which I'm hoping to get some casks of. And then they've went back to a nutty style, and I think they make all three styles there now. And at times we forget, because you're like, it's kind of like Springbank going, oh, we need a different style of whiskey for our Campbellton Loch blend. We'll just change the way Springbank's made for a couple of years till we get enough stock. It doesn't make sense to our heads, but then you forget that the whiskey industry it's a behemoth. It's huge. It's not as much as for me. You guys are all wonderful and you're all great customers. For the whiskey industry, we're such a tiny niche. The average price of a bottle of whiskey exported from Scotland last year, okay, there was no tax on it, but the average price of bottled stock, so no bulk, bottled stock, blend and malt, was £5 a bottle. So it shows we've been getting ripped off. But
not very much, is it?
It is one of these things that we sometimes forget when we get too geeky and you go, why is this distillery doing that? Why are they doing that? And it's like, well, it's the bigger picture, it's that we don't necessarily see the containers and containers of cheap whiskey that, no one puts in their marketing brochure, that we're selling stuff at 3-year-old in a day, not that the day is actually legally needed, but everyone says it. So Tiernan, again, another distillery that you don't normally see. 56.1% this one. You'll notice if you look closely at our bottles, they don't say cask strength on them, and that is because they are not. They're more or less cask strength, but so as I say, they're not cask strength because I'm from the northeast of Scotland and I like to save money. Somebody else trying to get in. Do you know what? I've been in the shop all day and nobody come in, and I try and do a tasting at night and folk try and get in. It's just
typical Mark. Typical.
But yeah, so this one's 56.1. The reason we're not at cask strength is because legally they're not. They're more or less cask strength. So as I said earlier, we get our stuff bottled at Claxton's. So once we've decided, this is good to bottle, this is what I think. It's always amazing. See, when you see these master blenders putting blends together, whether it's a cheap blend or a top end malt or whatever, and they're getting that consistency every time. That's an absolute skill, that these people do. All I do is go, yeah, that's good. Bottle it. It's fairly easy, So once we've decided that bit, once we've decided that bit, we then we get Claxton's to re-gauge the cask. So they re-gauge it, find out roughly how many bottles we're going to get out the cask and what the ABV is. But it can take maybe a month or two from that happening to it being bottled by the time we get labels done or whatever, or decide what the final lineup's going to be. So to make sure that the labels match the strength that's on the bottle, we take the strength down by 0.5%. So this one's 56.1, so it would have naturally been at 56.6. To get a true cask strength, we would need to bottle the whiskey. I was going to pick up a bottle to show you what a bottle looks like. I don't know why I need to do that. We need to bottle the whiskey, find out what the strength was, and then print the labels. Now, we could do that, and then we could put cask strength on the label, but that would hold us up. So it would still be, it would be another 2 weeks by the time we get the labels done. By But the main thing is we would get an extra handling charge for them having to re-handle the bottle, because they would bottle it, put it in a case, and then I'd take it out of the case and slap the label on. And that would cost me an extra 45 pence a bottle, which on shelf, 45 pence a bottle doesn't make that much difference. But we've bottled 34,422 bottles of whiskey. That's a lot of 45p's out of my pocket.
Yeah, that's a big time.
Just so that you can write cask strength on the label. So we're very open about it. It's not cask strength. It's 0.5% off. But whether you could tell any difference,
I think your customers wouldn't mind it not saying cask strength on the bottle, to be fair. So
yeah,
it's also like the percentage. It's absolutely fine.
Yep.
Yeah, it's when you're bottling something at 56.1, it's fairly cask strength, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a cracking dram. It's really good.
So we're liking this one. I'd say I like it. I really like it. I always get, and Kate's there the same. We're quite often doing tasting. Oh, I really like that. As if we're surprised that we've bottled something that we like. But it's 6 years on, and it still feels new, and it's still kind of exciting seeing your products on shelf, and and it's so to get in with you guys, it's like, oh, that's a wee kind of bonus. It's all good. That's a good question, Mary. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Mary. You're keeping things going nicely. So,
say all the buzzwords, Mark.
Yeah, I'll pay her later. So, as I said, we wanted to call it the Campbelltown Whisky Company, but we couldn't call it the Campbelltown Whisky Company Limited, which was a shame. So we thought, we'll do like images of Campbelltown on the label, or something like that. And we actually, so it was friends of ours who have a design agency in London. They've never done whiskey before, but they normally do exhibitions. So they did like the London Transport Museum, they did the Nelson Mandela exhibition, they did a Harry Potter exhibition, and all these kind of things. So they'd really not done any whiskey before, so that was quite nice to get someone who hasn't done whiskey before, because there's nothing that unusual about our labels really, but you always see in the whiskey industry when someone gets some new packaging, then everyone else gets new packaging, and it all looks the same pretty much, because they're all using the same agencies. It's whatever the in colours are at this time, or the in things. It's so we're speaking to the guys, and Nick and Bren, and they went away, and we'd had obviously the meeting beforehand, and they came back with what we'd asked for, so pictures of the harbour and all these kind of things, and we were kind of thinking, well, again, is it worthwhile having, a picture of Devar Island with a T in it? None of the two are connected, so it was like, but they were like, we've done what you said, but how about this? And it then transpired into the logo. And what the logo is it's a cross section of a taste bud. So if you take a taste bud, chop it in half, and look at it through a microscope, this is roughly speaking what it is. And it makes a lot of sense, because what we're all about, when we were speaking to the designers, it kept being about, we're all about taste. It doesn't matter the distillery name, whether it's a Ben Nevis, a Tanninic, a Macallan, or a Lafroig, a Highland Park. It has to taste good. It's all about the taste. And we're not about fancy wooden boxes or things like that, because, again, if you're on the higher end of whiskey, you do want some nice packaging, if you're gifting it or whatever. But, when it comes to wooden boxes and stuff, I always say there's only so many hamsters you can bury, it's and you don't drink packaging, so why pay for it? It's that's my fault. Again, different people, different brands. It's more important to other people. So it made a lot of sense when they came up with it, and it's very transferable, because, again, I say we don't have anything. We don't have a pagoda. We don't have a lot of whiskey companies will put a pagoda or something on. But if we bottle a rum, I don't know many rum distilleries. We bottled an Armagnac once. I don't know many Armagnac distilleries that have a pagoda on it. So the taste bud lends itself. You know, we've done rums, we've done an Armagnac, we did some beer with a Dutch company once for a while. So it's very transferable, and it kind of sums up what we're all about. It's all about taste. So that's where that came from. So yeah, thank you for that question. But no, definitely not me. I'm not artistic at all. Kate is. I have the ideas, but trying to make it happen in real life is between my brain and my hand and the pen. It loses its way sometimes. So, but yeah, it is. It's quite cool, and it's a logo that nobody knows what it is, which I quite like. So people generally tend to ask about it, which helps get conversation going. And I'll tell you a bit more about the labels and stuff once we get on to the next dram, if we've liked the team.
Yeah, excellent dram.
Very nice. Great dram.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now going to disappoint you all by pouring you a blend, because obviously you guys are all malt snobs and go to whiskey clubs and, you know, oh, look, young boy. Well, I don't get young boy anymore. I used to do when I was first in the industry and had dark hair. You used to get the hosts and tastings and you go, look, young boy, I know better than you. I've been drinking whiskey for 40 years. You know, I don't drink blended whiskey. I'm a malt drinker. But this is our peat smoke and Gorgie blend. It's only 5 years old. Now, sometimes we buy casks that have already been pre-blended. And if we do that, we'll bottle it as just as blended whiskey or blended Scotch whiskey or a blended malt if it's a blended malt or whatever. But occasionally we create our own blends ourselves. So this one, peat smoke and Gorgie, we had some 5-year-old heavily peated Highland malt. I don't know which distillery it was from. It was actually sold to me as a blended malt, peated Highland blended malt, and it was really good. Really peaty, but to be honest, we had got a little bit excited and bought it, and it was too expensive because it would have been a 5-year-old at 90 quid a bottle, and I was just like, no, it was crazy.
Might not sell.
At the same time, we'd bought some 12-year-old North British that had been in ex-sherry casks. So it was sherry casks from Macallan, so it held sherry, then held Macallan, and then they'd put some North British into it, so refill sherry butts. And the North British was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And we thought, do you know what, let's play around with this, because we'd bought 2 butts of it, 2 really big butts. And I cannot lie, it was 2 really big butts, but it was too much for that we could bottle and sell in a short period of time. And so we tried it, mixing it with the peated stuff, and it worked really well, and that's how peat smoke and Gorgie came. So Gorgie is obviously the area of Edinburgh where North British is, which is fairly obvious to people in Scotland. When I try selling this in Taiwan, they've no idea. But this is something, I've done lots of blends over the years. When I was at Duncan Taylor, I did some of the Black Bull stuff, and obviously I did all the blending when I was at Cadenheads. And I like doing it. It's something that we like having fun with. We don't do that much of it because, well, it's much easier to blend with other people's stock. You know, when you're taking 2 casks that you know you could sell independently and pouring them together to make something that is going to sell less well, it's possibly a bit more of a vanity project than it should be. But this we really liked, and it's 42% of it is the peated 5-year-old malt, and 58% of it is that 12-year-old North British. But it's quite interesting that the wee sherry notes in this are actually coming from the grain component. So we married it together and then stuck it back into the butt for about 6 months to give it time to properly marry together. Because whenever I'm blending casks together, even if it's, you know, 2 casks of the same thing, like everything we do is single cask, apart from one time we did 2 casks of a secret Orkney, so not Scapa, that we vatted together. But even doing that, I vatted them both together and put them back into cask for a period of time to let them marry together before bottling. Martin in the warehouse at Claxton's thought I was mental, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
He's a purist, Martin.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
Yes.
But this one you'll notice at 57.1, and this one we did water down quite a bit. Most other companies will have a reduced strength bottlings at like 46%, 43%, 40%. Our reduced strength range is at 57.1% ABV. So I kind of sums us up a little bit more. This was sitting naturally about 61%, something like that. And so I liked it at that strength, but psychologically, a lot of people will look at a label and see over 60% and go, that's going to be rocket fuel before they've even tried it. Even though, and we do it with our rums as well. A lot of our rums come in at like 68%, 69%. And if you bottle at that strength, you turn off a lot of customers. Whereas if you take it down to 57.1, you're adding 11% water. I can charge you for water. It's we get more bottles out of it. You get less duty on each bottle. It takes the price down. And 57.1 is a high enough strength that it feels cask strength. So, if people like to add a lot of water, they can. I'd love to tell you that we look at every cask and go, oh yeah, this one would be best at 58.9, and this one would be best at 57.6. I mean, who's to say I'm right and who's wrong? It's an educated guess, and we don't have the machinery to like test the samples. I get 100 ml sample out of my own cask. When I was at Cadneds, I used to get whole bottles because it was somebody else's. But it was.
So how many seconds do you do with that 100 ml sample that you get from the casks? How long does it take you to
decide whether we're going to bottle it?
Yeah.
Once we try it, it takes no time at all. Like, see if you have to think about whether you should bottle something or not, then you shouldn't be bottling it. Is my thing. That said, I am a very quick taster. I will make very quick decisions. Well, I'm quick at that as well, but. It is quite funny. Like I've seen at times I've been on tasting panels, writing tasting notes and stuff like that. And you're like, I did one. I was on a tasting panel and we did, I think it was 6 whiskies or 8 whiskies, and it took 3 hours. And I was like, I can do this. I could write tasting notes for 8 whiskies in 20 minutes. It's not. But it's my job, so it's fairly easy. But I remember once speaking to a guy who was starting an indie bottling company. He's like, so I will taste a whiskey and then go to bed, and if I wake up and I'm still thinking of it, then I'll bottle it. And I was like, well, when I was at Cadneds and we were bottling all that whiskey, if I had to go for a sleep every time I bottled a whiskey, then I would never be awake. So it's a fairly quick decision, and Kate and I pick everything that we bottle together, and we've never argued over whether something should be bottled or not. We have different styles that we like. I'm more of a Speyside bourbon cask. Kate's more into peat than I am. I really love peat, but if we're drinking in an evening, Kate will get to the peat before I do, if that makes sense. But there's never been a time where I've went, oh, I think we should bottle that, and she's like, no, or vice versa. But we've got, you know the quality. It might not be your thing or whatever, but so we chose 57.1 as a reduced strength because it's actually it's the old 100 proof. The old UK 100 proof is that, and when Kate first started at Springbank, they had a 10-year-old bourbon cask 100 proof. That was one of her favourite whiskies. And when I was growing up at Macallan, there was the old 10-year-old 100 proof with the red stripe across the label, which was one of my favourites. To think I used to... Macallan used to give me bottles of that to use in tastings when I was young, and I should have kept them all. But it's
think about how much they could be worth like these days.
yeah. Well, the benefit of hindsight, my mum and dad both worked at the distillery, and they used to they used to get a bottle of 10-year-old Macallan every month from the distillery, and a bottle of 18-year-old every Christmas, and they didn't really drink that much whiskey, and I was too young, and it was like we'd cupboards full of Macallan, and growing up at the distillery, everybody's houses had tons of Macallan in it. You would go to any time you went to visit anyone, you would take a bottle with you. It was just what you did. You were going to your auntie's for a cup of tea. Oh, we'll take a bottle of whiskey with us. You look back and think if we'd kept them, we would have been laughing. It was the funny thing is when my mum retired, she moved out because we had a tied house at Macallan, and she moved to Fochabers, and she sold most of her Macallan whiskey collection to Mike Lord, that used to own the whiskey shop in Dufton, and he's my best mate. He was best man at my wedding, and so I helped broker the deal between Mike and my mum, and I got her a decent deal, but that was 20 years ago. I mean, 15 years ago, or at least. I mean, if she'd still had that collection, we would be laughing. But the funny thing was, I was helping Mike out in the shop one day, working in the shop in Dufton, and I sold a few of these bottles of Macallan to a customer, and I was like, I've sold these bottles of whiskey twice. This was supposed to be my inheritance, and I sold them twice. I've not made a penny out of it. It's
no commission on that.
No commission at all. But everybody's got a degree in hindsight. But this I love. It's Peach Montgomery. It's a
very nice.
It's, I tell you, seeing a highball it makes quite a refreshing highball. I like a wee touch of peat in my highballs. I was going to say I don't get a huge amount of peat. No. I was expecting more, but there's not a huge amount. It's subtle peat, great. But I put peat smoke on the label so it would sell.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's the right markets,
but it's but I like it. So we always give it things a silly name when we bottle blends with ourselves. The first one we did was a vatting of North British, Glasgow, and Campbelltown blended malt. So we called that a Tale of Two Cities and a Wee Tune, because Campbelltown's known as a Wee Tune. So I was quite pleased with that one. Nice. And then my other one, which we've got a couple of bottles left of, was again a heavily sherried Glasgow, and we vatted it with some Ben Rinnes. So we called it Ben and Sherry. We've not had a cease and desist yet.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I don't think we're not a big enough radar for that, to be honest.
You might see it come through in 10 years' time.
Yeah, well, it's all sold out, so it's too late. But it's quite fun. On the nonsense levels. So I was telling you, tasting notes are nonsense. Coming back to the labels, you'll see in front of you there. I don't need to keep showing you. All the bottles are different colours, and that's what, after we got the labels designed, we knew we wanted colour on the labels. We wanted to kind of stand out and be different colours, but we didn't want to go down the regional route, because regions are great when you're starting out in whiskey, and Diageo did a great job with them with the Classic Six, to get people into different regions. And it's great when you're starting out in whiskey because you go, right, boom, boom, try the different regions and go down a path. Oh, I like the smoky ones, or I like this and I like that. But when you're at the level of drinking what whiskey, you don't need that things. And regions are a bit old hat these days, I would say, because there's peated stuff made in Speyside, there's peated stuff made in the Lowlands, there's unpeated Islas, and how you look at the size of the Highlands, how that can be classed as, the thing. And then a few years ago, they got rid of the islands as a region, so Arran was made homeless, and it now had in the Highlands, so you're telling me that, Talisker is the same as Glenmorangie, it's a bit that. But I am, as my wife will say, a weirdo. I think it's neurodivergent. I think she's supposed to say now. So I'll get the HR team onto her if she gives me any more stuff. I'm not sure whether it's me that's HR or if Kate's the HR officer.
Oh, it's one of it.
I might be Kate. Maybe Kate.
Probably going to be Kate, to be honest. So basically, I have synesthesia. So synesthesia means I smell in colours. So I only get it when I'm thinking about it. But basically, the bottom label is roughly the colour that I smell when I'm smelling the whiskey. Now, so as I say, tasting notes are nonsense. This is the next level of nonsense because you cannot get inside my head, and thankfully you can't for you guys, to see what's going on inside my head. Now, it's something that I've always had, but like Kate was always just thinking I was being pretentious because I'd be like, "Oh, this smells red," and she'd be like, "Oh, stop being such a wanker," you know. But I was 10 years ago. I was drinking with Dave Broom, and I was like, "Oh, this smells green." He's like, "Do you smell in colour?" I'm like, "Aye." So you've got synesthesia. So basically, what synesthesia means is you're wired up slightly wrong. It's a superpower, really. It really is. But it's it's your senses get mixed up slightly, so it cross wires slightly. So some people have it like me, where they smell in colour. Some people will have it where different letters will be different colours. Some people see people in different colours. Some people can see music. Other people, words or sounds will give them taste sensations. It's all because of cross wiring. Now, the thing is, it affects, roughly 5% of the population of the world have some form of synesthesia, but most people don't know they have it. It comes up in conversation for me because I talk about smells and things. Now, some other people will smell in colours, but by association. So it'll smell grassy, so they'll be, "Oh, this smells green." Or, you know, it smells orangey, so it smells orange, to just use an obvious example. Whereas mine is completely random. But every time I go back to the same whiskey, I get the same colour. And I say it's only when I'm thinking about it. It's not like I'm walking down the street having some mad trip whenever there's a new smell comes into the thing. So I've been logging it since we've started the company, and we've found no correlation whatsoever. So there we go. I see sounds in different colours. There we go. So it's normally during tastings there'll be someone either has some form of it or knows someone that has some form of it, and everyone's different. But there's been no correlation because when Kalila, coming back to Kalila, it's the most consistent dram in the world. It's absolutely brilliant. But when we did the first Kalila, it was purple. So I went, right, let's go and try other Kalilas. And we've bottled 5 Kalilas so far, and they've all been different colours. And they've all been 9 to 11-year-old bourbon cask Kalilas, and they're all different. So it is a bit of nonsense. It's not like pink ones are fruity. You know, we've got heavily peated pink ones, and the Royal Brattler's pink. You know, so it is quite fun. We fudged it a little bit, in that we've got 9 different taste buds with 3 different colours on it. So I'm picking from 27 colours to begin with. So that I'm not sat with a Pantone reference book, every time I'm writing a tasting note. And also, so my marketing degree does have some, people laugh when they say I've got a marketing degree, but my marketing degree does work off so that we're not going, "Oh, this is a shitty brown colour," you end up with a brown label or whatever, So it's.
I think you need to have words with Dulux because their colour scheme seems to be all over the place.
Yeah, well, this is it. So it's so that's that. That is, it's a bit fun. It's a bit different. We've done a few tastings during the festival down here where we've done like all blue label tastings or all green label tastings. Johnny Walker did not know about that either, but it's it is quite fun to see if people like things more than others. The only consensus we've had is from a couple of Kate's pals that don't drink whiskey, that they make less faces with the green ones than they do with the other ones. So it's that's about as long as it gets. But it's complete nonsense. But then tasting notes are completely nonsense. So it's all a bit of fun.
Yeah. It's all personal, and
it is.
I
It's all
think
completely
that's
personal.
A nice label.
And it's also, if we'd went, well, the thing is, see if we'd went the regional route, we could have had the different colours on the shelf. But your Isla whiskey sells out quite quickly. There's very little from Campbelltown. There's very little from the Lowlands. So your shelf just looks Speyside colour, Speyside and Highland colour. So you've kind of defeated the purpose of having colourful labels when it's just all green or whatever colour you've picked for Speyside. You know,
well, you've hit the nail on the head there, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Speyside whiskies, obviously, but there is that.
I like the way you've done it. I like the way you've done it, Mark.
It's something a bit different, and it's quite. I think Fetter Cairn have done synesthesia inspired whiskey recently, but not as much as we've done. But yeah, so let's move on to the last whiskey. It's the Lefroy.
Go for it.
This is our latest bottling, and in fact, because the world's crazy these days, there are only 2 places in the UK that you can buy this, and the same with the Ben Nevis and the Teeninich, and that's if you make the long and winding road to Campbelltown, or you can buy directly from you guys at TB Watson's. So TB Watson's is the only UK stockist of this Lefroy, which is madness. Shows how crazy other people are.
Cheers, Mark.
So 12-year-old Lefroy, delighted to be able to have it and call it Lefroy. It's not a Williamson, it's a Lefroy. This was naturally at 64.7, so we did knock this one down to 57.1%, and it's just a hoggy. So delighted to get this. And this is, I think you guys have got it, I don't know, 73 quid, something like that. I don't know what your prices are.
66 on offer.
Yeah,
66 on offer. That's a bargain. That's a really good price. You know, but you look at that price. If we'd bought a Lefroy 12-year-old 2 years ago, that would need to be on the shelf for at least 150 quid a bottle. And it's, you know, I don't feel comfortable bottling stuff at that kind of price. So
yeah.
But this is good. It's not overly medicinal, but it's smoky. It's there. Like Lefroy has calmed down over the years. They say it hasn't, but it certainly has. It's not the beast that it was, 20 years ago.
Yeah. So a lot of people come into the shop and say that, as soon as you mention Lefroy gets, oh no, it's too smoky, or but they are talking off experience that goes back maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely. I haven't had the privilege of trying some older bottled Lefroys, but for me it's not as bad as everyone made it out to be.
Yeah, there's a mate of mine lives in Japan. He's a great guy. He's got 2 houses in Tokyo. One is just for his whiskey. Like it's mad. Like you go to the toilet and there was like 5 different 25-year-old Macallans sitting on the top of the toilet cistern, and I got whiplash in his house because I didn't know where to look first. There was so much great whiskey, and we did a tasting of 7 different 10-year-old Lefroys from over the last 30 years. And in fairness, that tasting was probably 12 years ago, so you were looking like, and the old stuff was so much bigger than the stuff today. And you've also got the fact that that's been bottle aged, so it'll have calmed down a wee bit as well. But I really like this one, and it's so nice to see Lefroy go on the market that we can afford, and that we can name. Because normally you have to call it Williamson, and it really confuses me. All these distilleries selling you stuff, but you're not allowed to use the name, but you can use this other brand name that will let everyone know what it is. It's kind of pointless, but historically you could buy stuff unnamed, and the unnamed stuff would be much cheaper. So you could go, do you want a cask of Macallan? It'll be this price. But if you want a cask of Macallan that you can't name, it'll be this price. But over the years, there's not much difference in it. You can usually get around it. If it's a secret Highland, it's a Clynelish, you stick waxy on the label and people know it's a Clynelish. It's probably, if we ever bottle a Tullibardine, we'll just call it the Secret Highland and put Waxy on the label, and people will think it's a Clynelish and buy it. You know, it's but it is quite fun. So, what do we think of the Lefroy then?
I don't mind it at all. I like it.
It's quite big. It's quite beefy, but it's
definitely a number 8 of the night, isn't it? I mean, it's the most powerful
early doors. It always amazed me, you know. You see people coming to like Drambusters, great show, but like first thing in the morning, they go straight for the big peat. You know, like why? You know, it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you're on the Optimo or whatever. It's like
open at half 12, by the way. Not far off it, but your point still stands. Your point still stands, Mark. I mean,
yes,
you wouldn't head for the peaty stuff straight away. I mean, it makes no sense. So,
yeah, but I like peaty whiskies. And again, sometimes you want just a punch of peat, but this is much nicer. You know, there's more going on. You've got the creaminess, you've got the peat's there, but it's not smacking you in the face, if that makes sense. And I think, again, whiskey's coming back. There was a while, there was a race to the top to be the peatiest, and we're this parts per million, we're that parts per million, and it wasn't about balance. It wasn't about whiskey. It was just about getting peat. And it's a bit, you know, like spicy food. People are like, I can, you know, this amount of Scovilles or you know, and peat is the same as chilies in that once you get beyond a certain level, you can't taste it anymore. You know, and there's a bit, and I think Islay whiskies have realised that, and they're coming back and they're trying to promote more flavour than just peat, which is nice.
That's what I was saying to a customer today about Octomore. Because it's got such a high ppm level, but can you actually taste the difference between 50 and say 150?
50 and 120. It's, you know, it's like chilies. If it's 1 million Scovilles or if it's 5 million, can you taste the difference? You know, it's
no.
You know, but I think it's one of these things that drinks go through these things where they try to reach the extremes. You know, whiskey did it with peat. Rum's doing it with esters, you know, so much so that there's some rums we're drinking today that were never intended for human consumption, you know, and then you've got, you know, beer does it with overly hopped beer. You know, I love hoppy beer, but sometimes these days you just get handed some hops and you've got to let it ferment in your mouth. You know, and again, I like balance, and you know, I think with this Lefroy, the balance is very much in there.
It's pretty much spot on that. To be fair,
yeah,
that's good.
That's a good dram. How did you come about getting a nameable Lefroy? Is it something that it's not all that common? But the guy I bought it from had full naming rights, so I got full naming rights. So.
That's the way it works,
becoming more available. Again, it's all about who you know. It's being in the right place at the right time. And drinking with the right people is pretty much where it all happens. It's
makes sense.
It is. But it was really, really good. And it was just pure coincidence that the label happened to be green and white. You know, I did smell green on it. It's pure coincidence.
Well, I'll believe you on that one.
Absolutely.
But
what a tasting!
Yeah,
fantastic whiskies.
Great way to round it off.
It is. It's, like on paper, you're like, oh god, there's a lot of bourbon cask here, but they're all different. And you know, the Tiernan, bit of sherry, Lefroy, peaty blend.
The key point is you can actually taste the difference because they are bourbon casks. You know.
Yeah, totally.
They are bourbon casks. You can taste the difference between each whiskey tonight, and brilliant, really good stuff.
It's one of these things that it's, you know, we do know that people are not going to like them all, but you know, we try and bottle things that we like, and we think people are going to like, because at the end of the day, me and Kate, we're whiskey geeks, you know, and we're doing this. Yes, we're doing it to make money, you know. That's all people work for. You know, you don't work for fun. You know, if we didn't have to work, none of us would work. You know, but you know, we're doing it because we're whiskey geeks, and you know, we're making a living out of it. We're not trying to take over the world. You know, there's just me and half a Kate in the company, so you know, we don't need to be bottling 100 casks a year or whatever. As long, you know, we live in Campbelltown, the prices are fairly cheap down here. You know, we don't need to be you know, taking over the world, so to speak. So but it's been good. 6 years we're still going. I never thought it would happen, and then I was really delighted when once we'd done the first bottling, and I thought, well, I've done it now. You know, if it all goes tits up, at least it's been done. But no, we're still there. We're still doing strong, and it's you know, it's really nice seeing our stuff on shelves. You know, like in your shop, or you see people on social media sharing our stuff. It's great. And what I really love is when I see somebody sharing a whiskey picture on social media or whatever, and not necessarily about our whiskey, but our whiskey's in the background, and you're like, yep, you know, that's we're on the back bar of that bar, or
you can spot it. You can spot it a mile off, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, but that's a thing. I'm sure you guys are the same. Whenever I'm watching a film or watching telly, they'll go into a shop. I'm scouring the back label, you know, and then you're watching stuff like, I don't know, Last King of Scotland, and they're drinking, drinking Glenfiddich, and you're like, well, that label didn't exist back then. Or, you know, Peaky Blinders were drinking Bombay Sapphire. I was like, well, Bombay Sapphire wasn't introduced until 1988. And you're like, don't just concentrate on the film instead of this, you know, the minutiae of
product placement that means nothing.
I know.
Just get on with the film.
But it proves that people like us look for it.
We do.
But no, it's all fun. It's all fun.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, well, hopefully people have enjoyed it. You know, if anyone's got any questions, or even if people are watching this afterwards, and you know, have any questions, just drop us an email. It's just mark@whatwhiskey.com, or you know, get in touch through social media or whatever. You know, when you get on the Facebook accounts or whatever, it's us that are answering it. We don't have ghostwriters or anything like that. Kate would like me to have a ghostwriter so that I'm not necessarily on social media too much. But, you know, I think this is one of the things that we're trying to push is, you know, that it's connecting with us. It is just us.
That's a nice thing. It's a nice thing. It should be. It's good.
But yeah. All good fun. Thank you for inviting us and for stopping us, and thank to all you guys out there, particularly Mary Bell, who helped the tasting go so well, for all your questions and everything. And we'll hopefully see you all soon, and hopefully you'll all have a good time with Kate with the Tormore tasting.
Definitely, I'm sure we will.
Looking forward to it.
We'll take you off screen in a wee minute, Mark, and then we'll speak to you afterwards.
Get we catch up afterwards,
We want the raffle now.
Brilliant. Good luck in the raffle.
Right. Catch you in a bit, Mark.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. So
let's move on to the part that everyone's still hanging on for.
How many prizes do we have?
We only have 2 tonight. But they are whiskies from Mark that you haven't tried tonight. Exciting drams on offer. Ronnie, you want to do the honours of the first draw? Not meant to look.
I'll look into the ether here. Here we go.
First one.
Hopefully the people at home can see this.
278. 278. I'll think whatever that is. We'll go for number 2 here. Second and final prize, lower, a wee bit lower. 254. Excellent. So a bit of a range on that one. Well done to those winners. Thank you very much all for tuning in. Like I mentioned at the start of the show, we've got an exciting exclusive single cask bottling coming very soon. hopefully within the next 6 to 8 weeks, we hope. A UK first as well, local distillery to us.
That's right.
Crafty distillery, Billy & Co. Whisky. 3.5 years old, Oloroso Octave, 50%. That one's not to be missed. Obviously, Whisky Club members will get first chance at it. And then it'll go on general sale, but we don't think there will be much left, if anything at all. So, but next tasting, Tormore Distillery. Exciting, we'll have Kate Watt,
The
Mark's wife.
online tasting is the 23rd of October.
And we'll see you then. We have some other dates in the diary, some in-store tastings, barrel top, a new tasting room through the back as well. So, yeah, thank you very much for watching, and good night, everyone. Cheers.
Take it easy. Cheers.